This is part 5 of the Craftsman Emerson Gen 4 Commercial Drill Press Rebuild Series. If you haven't seen part 4, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we're going to be cleaning and masking a lot of the parts. We're also going to fabricate that pin for the tilt table accessory and a few other things. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. Continuing where we left off in part 4, I'm mixing up some citric acid with cold water to soak some of these larger pieces, the base and the table. These will soak for 24 hours just like the parts that are in the bin to the left. And after they're done soaking, we will pull them out, rinse them off, and then towel dry them. And we're going to do this with everything that's coming out of the citric acid. These are some smaller parts, and once I've dried them off, I'm going to stick them in these little bins, and I'm going to coat them with WD-40. Pretty much anything that's not going to get painted is going to get coated with WD-40. And that's just to keep it from building up any surface rust while we work on cleaning everything. So just like I said, all that stuff there getting coated with WD-40. So anything that is getting painted, we do not want to coat in WD-40. And here I am drying off the head casting. And this is where I discovered that I had forgotten that set screw that holds the eccentric bearing inside the head. Right there. Anyways, once I got that set screw out, I went back and looked at the eccentric bearing, and we did gouge it a little, but I was able to sand that bearing flush and get it looking squared away. So I think we're going to be fine. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clean up these two tables. And what I do is I'll spray it down with some WD-40. And then I'm going to start with 60 grit. And I'm going to go all the way up to 220 grit. And this is for any of the milled areas on the table. So the table surface, that entire milled area around where the column bore is, and the milled surface that allows the attachment of the accessory table. So I'll basically do a forward and then a backward pass with one grit of sandpaper, and then change the grit of the sandpaper, wipe the table clean with a paper towel, and then continue. And I'm only using the WD-40 as a lubricant on the 60 grit sandpaper. All the grits after that, I'm just dry sanding. But I wanted you to kind of see just how good it looks after you've kind of wet sanded with the WD-40. So if you didn't want to soak your items in citric acid, this is another good way to get the rust off of the table. But of course, it's only going to remove the rust in the areas that you're sanding. And there are some divots in the center of this table, but nothing too severe. And then, like I said, we'll just dry sand the rest of it. So obviously, since we use WD-40 on this table, we're going to need to soak the table again in simple green. when we're done sanding. And we only need to soak it for like an hour or so, just enough to get the WD-40 off of it. And then we can rinse it, dry it off, and we're ready to start masking for paint. But we'll do that in a little bit. And that's how that table is going to look. So next we just move on to the accessory table, and we basically do the exact same thing. Now, of course, you could do this by hand as well, as opposed to using a oscillating sander. The one thing you don't want to do is don't use a belt sander unless you know what you're doing, because you will really mess up the surface of your table. And there's that table dry sanded all the way to 220. And that's as sanded as these tables are going to get. So like I said, next we're just going to soak them in the simple green. You only need to soak it for about an hour, but I went ahead and soaked them overnight. No big deal. And all that's doing is taking the WD-40 off of them. So next we're going to fabricate that lock pin for the tilt table. I'm using some 1/2-inch bar stock steel. I don't remember which steel it is. It's the same stuff that I use to make handles for vices and that kind of stuff. So it's some pretty stout stuff, but it machines pretty good. And basically we need about a 1/4-inch pin. So we're just milling that sucker down slowly but surely. Not really going to go into the whole process of milling something like this. It's, if you don't have a metal lathe, then really doesn't matter anyways. But yes, we could just buy a 1/4-inch pin, but screw it, we're going to make it. And after I built it, I'm going to go ahead and sand it and then polish it. So we dry sand it, and then we wet sand it, and then we polish it. And that pretty much finishes that little pin. So next we're going to start doing some other lathe work, and in preparation for working with some of this stuff on the lathe, we're going to go ahead and wire wheel it. And this is the spindle, and I'm basically just cleaning out the splines that are on the top end of that spindle with a brass wire wheel. And then this is the sleeve for the Jacob's chuck. And these items are going to get chucked in the lathe and cleaned up better, but the wire wheel is an initial cleaning on them. And that's the chuck body for the Jacob's chuck. So this is the spindle chucked into my lathe, and we do not want to take a lot of material off of any of these parts. So we're going to be light sanding, wet sanding, and we're going to start at 400 grit. We're going to go 400, 600, 800, and 1,000, and that's it. And after 1,000, we're going to apply that Mother's Mag and aluminum polish, and then we'll buff it. And then we'll flip that spindle around to the other end. Once we've got the spindle done, then we can put the chuck body on the spindle. And doing the chuck body can be kind of challenging. The center area of the body where those bores are for the jaws can get real sharp, and they will grab your finger, a rag, anything you get near them. So you got to be really careful when you're doing the chuck body. Like, I'm not even touching that center section. I'm doing kind of the bottom section and the threaded safety collar up top. After we've cleaned that stuff and polished it, we're going to coat everything with a penetrating oil. Next, we're going to be cleaning up the Jacob's chuck sleeve. So we dry sand it and then wet sand it. I think we started at around 100 grit with dry sanding, and we dry sanded all the way up to 320. And then we moved on to wet sanding. After that, we moved to the Mother's Mag and Aluminum polish, and we're just buffing it off here. And it had some pitting on it. That's why we did the dry sanding. Otherwise, we would have just done the wet sanding. So this, I believe, is the spindle pulley insert. And we're doing kind of the same thing. Yep. So we're just wet sanding it, 400, 600, 800, and 1,000, then applying the polish, the mag and aluminum polish. And I think this might be the Pinion, where we did kind of the same thing. Nope, that's still the insert. Now that's the Pinion. Yeah, kind of the same thing. 400, 600, 800, and 1,000. And then the polish. And then this is the Quill. And then we've got the rotor for the motor. So we're just going to clean that shaft up. You got to be really careful working with this. There's a lot of fan blades and sharp edges that are spinning here. You can lose a finger real easily. So, but we're just cleaning up the shaft. Same thing. 400, 600, 800, 1,000, then polishing it. And then this is one of the 3 feed handle rods. And again, same thing. 400, 600, 800, and 1,000. Next, I've got a couple of wire bottle brushes that I'm going to use to clean out some of these bores. Not so much of an issue on the zinc stuff, but the steel stuff, we want to get any rust that's on the inside of those bores out. So everything we cleaned up on the lathe, we're going to clean any of the holes in there. And next we'll do kind of a dry polishing of the bores inside the Jacob's chuck body. So I'm just using my Fordham here with a cotton cloth wheel on there. This is basically the same thing as a Dremel. So if you've got a Dremel, same. And then, of course, we coat everything with the Super Slick Stuff penetrating oil. And then we'll just set all that stuff to the side. Next, we are going to use some electrical contact cleaner and clean up the windings and the stator on the inside of the stator. Once we've done that, then we're going to start masking the stator. So I'm going to mask, basically taping all of those loose wires towards the center, and then I'm going to mask closed any of the vent holes that are on the sides of the stator. And then we'll flip it over and mask the other side as well. We'll go ahead and mask the motor decal that's on the side of it. It's kind of hard to remove it without tearing it up, so I just usually mask over it. And then we're going to wire wheel the stator to get all of that paint that's on there off. And then this is the switch mounting plate, and then the hub. And then the end frames for the motor. The terminal cover, the power panel cover, column collars, the capacitor cover, the power panel, feed stop bracket, the motor cage, and the motor mount, and the only thing that I needed to get the paint off of that it didn't really come off in the simple green was the base. And this is actually kind of typical. For whatever reason, that paint on the base does not want to come off there real well. So here I'm mixing up some citrus strip. You can get it at Home Depot. I like it because you can use it indoors. It's safe, it's non-toxic. It's real easy to use. You just apply it with a brush, and then you can cover your item in plastic and let it sit overnight. Then you come back and scrape it or use a wire brush on it, and all that paint should come right off. So real simple to use. Not a real bad odor or anything like that. And that's why I use it. Next, while that's brewing over there to remove the paint, we're going to use the wire brushes to remove any surface rust in any of the bores on the table. Then we'll start masking the table. So anything that's not getting painted is going to get masked. So that's all of the bores. And then any of the table surfaces. And these are just various shots of the masking process. So as you can imagine, it takes a good bit of time to get all this stuff masked and cleaned up properly. Probably could do it faster if I didn't care so much about how it looks, but yeah, that's kind of my work ethic. So next we'll do the same for the tilt table. So obviously both this table and the other table got pulled out of the simple green, rinsed off, and then towel dried. And that's how we got to where we are. And that's wax paper that I'm using there. If you don't put tape on those openings that were on the table face, you'll get bleed through when you paint the bottom side. So that tape is important. And next, for the end frames for the motor, I've just taken some 1/2-inch thick foam and cut circles out of it that I'm going to use to mask off the sleeve bearings. And then I've got some plugs just to the left of where I'm standing right now. A little plastic bin of plugs there. These are all silicone plugs. You can throw them in the oven and stuff. I use them on firearms, but they come in a variety of sizes, so they're pretty handy in closing up like those 2 oil fill ports that are on those end frames. And with that, I think that's going to wrap up this video. In the next video, we're going to continue the masking, and then we're going to prime and paint stuff. So as always, I appreciate the support. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please like and subscribe. Don't forget about the links in the description, and I will see you next time.